I talk to so many people that like in my DMs on Instagram that are like spending all of this time and money and energies buying all of this equipment, and then they don't really seem to have a plan for how they're going to even travel.
Hello and welcome to another Adventure Labs podcast. I'm your host, Connor Ricky. If you're new here, the Adventure Labs podcast is all about connecting with fellow adventure creators and hearing their stories behind the content they create. Now, from the outside, pursuing content creation might look pretty easy. You just get to travel around, have a lot of fun, shoot photos, shoot sunset, sunrise, just, make money from it. Yeah, it's easy. No. All of us that are inside of it know that is not the case. It's not easy. So a mission of this podcast here is to teach and inspire how to do those things through raw conversations, with creators who have done it and are currently doing it. Also, as creators, we're a little bit more introverted than other, say, professions. We spend a lot of time shooting by ourselves, traveling by ourselves, editing by ourselves. So I wanted to create this podcast as a way to give you access to more conversations between the people you follow, your friends, so that you can listen to those and be inspired by those at your convenience, whether you're editing photos, you're on the treadmill, you're out working out, you're on the road traveling to your next destination. You can be learning all about adventure, photography, video, content creation. So those are some reasons why the Adventure Labs podcast exists. Today on the podcast, we have photographer Brian Johns on Instagram. It's at Brian Johns Adventure. Spell it just how it sounds. He's a landscape and wildlife photographer from Massachusetts, but shoots mainly out west. He's got some epic work at various national parks like Grand Teton National Park, Yellowstone, Glacier, and more. He's going to give us some advice for those looking to find their own creative style and grow our audience. I think he's around like 60,000 on Instagram right now, so congrats to him. He also finishes the episode off by telling a story about the time he was surrounded by wolves, a pack of wolves in Yellowstone. So that's such an awesome story towards the end of the podcast. But without further ado, let's get into it. It's value packed. He has some amazing advice for aspiring landscape and wildlife photographers. Enjoy the podcast. All right, Brian Johns, thank you so much for coming on the Adventure Labs podcast today. Super excited to have you on and kind of hear about your journey in photography. Really quick, let's start out by letting us know kind of where you're at in the world. Like, where are you during this whole COVID quarantine crisis?
Hey, thank you so much, Ricky. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Very humbled to be invited. So I am currently about 45 minutes south of the big city of Boston and getting ready for more adventures at this time that will not be in Massachusetts, but that's where I've been for the coronavirus.
Nice. Have you always lived in that area? You grew up kind of on the East Coast, or?
Yeah, kind of interesting. I grew up for the most part in the East Coast. I'm actually a military brat, but my dad got out of the Navy when I was like 8 years old. Then we settled in Massachusetts, so it's where family is.
Nice, right on.
Yeah.
I assume you're pretty close to a lot of different areas where you travel to and shoot. Is that like, do you enjoy being in that area because of photography, or are there other reasons why you dig being there?
For Massachusetts?
Yeah.
So, not really. No, I really appreciate that question. I have certainly started to get into more Massachusetts photography in the last couple of years. However, most of my adventures, especially as an influencer in the last couple of years since I started traveling, have been out west.
Gotcha.
So I'd say I like to come back here because I have family here, and I'm also trying to fit my photography into that realm as well.
Cool. Well, right on. Well,
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us that quick background there. I always just like to kind of, see where people are at in the world, and, sometimes over audio for the people listening, like it's hard to tell where the heck we are. So without further ado, let's kind of get in some questions here. So before we get too deep on anything, I kind of just want to hear sort of your background with photography, with social media, with adventure and travel, all that stuff. Like, if you could just give me a kind of a background for people who have not seen your work before. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So in 2016 is when I started traveling. So at that point, to kind of back up, I had really just gotten out of the military at that point. I was an officer in the Army, decided I really just wanted to transition to more of a, I guess, my own lifestyle at that point. So just kind of having like a really big lifestyle change in 2016, but I didn't know where I wanted it to go. I just knew that I wanted to see national parks. So that's where my travels started in 2016. So I probably did somewhere between 5 to 6 months of just traveling, seeing places, and just shooting with a point shoot camera that I got at Walmart.
That's
Uh,
awesome. I love that.
yeah, so that's why I try to tell people. I've been getting more into blogging and stuff like that a little bit, and I certainly do a lot of writing on social media, and that's kind of the message that I try to put out to people. And a lot of the questions that I get asked is that it's really the traveling that got me into photography, not the other way around. Which
Oh,
I
okay.
think
That's
it's
neat.
kind of like I think it could go either way. I'm sure a lot of people that maybe they just see a lot of fancy cameras and they want to start traveling. For me, it was like I was really hooked on this idea of going to places like Yellowstone and Yosemite. And then because of that, I realized I really wanted to get some cameras and take it further.
Dude, that's so cool. That just shows right there that you're actually super passionate about the subject matter that you're capturing. Because, like you said, a lot of people see work on Instagram and social media, and they just want that clout, I guess. Like they just want the followers. They just want they just want cool photos hung up and stuff, but they don't like truly care about the subject they're shooting. And of course, you don't see many people that are successful that start that way. Like I see a trend of people I talk to, photographers within kind of the space, and everyone sort of has a similar answer to that. People that have seen success is that like they started with either travel or being a skydiver or crazy adventure, and then they sort of transitioned into the content creation side because they're so passionate about it that they wanted to capture it and be able to share that with the world and show people like how awesome this thing that they're experiencing is. um,
That's
so
really
that's
great
really,
that you said that. Actually, yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it's inspiring for sure. So how would you explain your style, I guess, your creative style? Do you do more photo, more video?
That's a great question as well. So for the first really couple of years, and it's interesting. Sometimes I have to think about my adventures, and I keep thinking that it's been 2 or 3 years. At this point, it's 3 years plus, going on 4 years of travel, but probably closer to 3 years or so of actual photography. And then if you want to talk about like actually trying to move into any type of a professional photography realm, we're probably looking at more like 2 years. So it's certainly been quite the process of moving from just a hobbyist traveler into photography. And for the most part, that 2 years of photography has been comprised of landscape still shots. It isn't until really the last few months that I've started really trying to dig more into videography. I would not consider myself in any way a professional videographer, but that's the goal for this year. So I've started acquiring more equipment, watching a lot more either YouTube or listening to podcasts, and just practicing, I guess, as far as videography. So far it's been a lot of still frames, and I think that's great. But I think in certain ways, I don't want to say that I've gotten bored of still frames, but I think there's just that unknown factor of like what can I really do as far as creating films, and how I can put those together. That excites me right now a lot more. So I'm hoping to transition to a lot more of a videographer this year.
Okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to let you know from an outside perspective, I still love your photos. I still love checking out your photos. Maybe, I mean, you do like whatever is the most fun for you. That's what matters at the end of the day, but I'm
Mhm.
still super stoked on checking out your photos. But I have been looking at your YouTube videos and some of the crazy animal stuff you've been posting. Like I think like there was some animal attack or like some hunt that you got on video. That was super cool to watch. That was like a unique
Mhm.
perspective. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
appreciate
awesome.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I mean, we already sort of touched on it, but how would you say you sort of found your style in photography?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I would say I found my style by just kind of like I said, just kind of getting addicted to going on these adventures. I'm going to kind of talk about my friend Quinn here just a little bit because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's relevant. I'm sure you're familiar with Quinn, the work of Ever Changing Horizon on Instagram.
Absolutely.
He's one of the big influences, and like I talk to him a lot, and like I can kind of feel a very similar vibe to what I'm trying to do, and what he is very very well and successfully done. I mean, he's obviously one of the more successful photographers in the world, and I think what I'm trying to do and what I have in certain ways done to find my theme is I've just gotten really addicted to this idea of finding new places and going on new adventures, which of course is kind of like his account, like finding a new horizon every day. And by doing that and trying to go out and seek new adventures, I guess we'll call it, or horizons, my style has changed over the years and it's kind of gone back and forth. But the one thing that I would say that's really stuck, one or two things, is really trying to create exciting adventures that just keep me passionate and keep me wanting more. That would be one thing, and trying to tell stories as, I guess, compelling, as I can, certainly as honest as I can, but also as compelling as I can. So I've been very much into the storytelling aspect, and I think that's what's driving me more towards the YouTube now.
Nice, right on. And yeah, I can kind of tell that just from your posts are kind of longer than most people I see. Like a lot of people, just throw a few words in there with some hashtags. But I have noticed consistently, even when I went like pretty deep in your feed, like you really spend time
Mhm.
to like tell more of an in-depth story behind, the image or something you were feeling during the time. So and I think that's sort of a good way to really build engagement and build your audience. And I kind of see that as a trend moving forward, is like really diving deeper into the story behind the photo. So for anyone listening that's like just getting into social media or wants to grow their Instagram account, grow their personal brand or their photography page, I think that's something to consider, is learn from you and what you just said there, and really dive deeper into what that photo represents, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Um, I got to ask, so how'd you run to Quinn? How'd you kind of build that friendship? Because Quinn's obviously an absolute legend at Ever Changing Horizon on Instagram. For those of you who haven't checked his stuff out, but
Right.
what an awesome mentor to have, someone to bounce ideas off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I'm glad you asked that question, because I know, like, I kind of just brought it up. So now you're kind of just adapting the conversation and bringing in, kind of a cool question. I think I ended up following Quinn originally. This was like at this point, probably 3 years ago or something like that. I was in Yosemite and I had been following Travis Burke, someone else that I really look up to, and they were going on a trip together. So I was like following Travis Burke really closely. And then that's when I was like, oh, wow, look at this Quinn guy. So then I followed him for a few months, really loved his work. And I was actually working out at Grand Teton National Park at the time. I was
Oh,
the
sick.
guy processing people's tickets to come in, believe it or not. Kind of a
Dude, that's
crazy.
awesome.
Yeah, definitely an interesting experience. And the funny thing about this, not to get too into it, but I saw that Quinn was in Wyoming. He was actually sponsored by the Wyoming State Tourism Board on a trip. I think he was there for a solid like month. It was like a really cool trip that he was on. So I was following him very closely. Of course, like anyone else, I would dream about trying to get connected. At the time, I think I had like 5,000 followers, and he had like 3 or 400K. So he was pretty well successful at that point. And I had no clue what I was doing, and really in no way was a professional photographer at all. I was trying to make it that way, but I had maybe sold a few prints, and that's about it. But I was getting some shots that were kind of getting some recognition at that time, some grizzly bear shots and different things. And I kept making comments on his page saying like, hey Quinn, really love, like, I don't know, just kind of like with my posts, I would just make it really detailed, really genuine, letting them know that, hey, I'd love to link up with you. And I kind of left
Mm-hmm.
it at that. Never thought anything would happen. Here's the interesting thing. Then all of a sudden I see a truck pull up to the gate, and it said hashtag that's why for the Wyoming State Tourism Board. And I ended up kind of talking with him and just mentioned to him like how cool I thought that was and that I'm a photographer. And then this is his reaction. I had no clue who he was because at that time I don't think he was even, if he was posting stories, maybe I wasn't looking at it. I didn't really know that much what he looked like. I ended up giving him my business card just because
Nice.
he was asking questions. He was very like intuitive. He's like, oh, so you're into photography. I gave it to him that night. He ended up texting me, and I still had no idea that was Quinn. And he's just like, hey, I'm wondering if you want to hike to Delta Lake for sunrise. And Delta Lake is one of those. At that point, I didn't even know what it was, honestly. But I looked it up, and I was like, oh shoot. So then, of course, I said, yeah, like I'd love to do that. I had to work the next day at the gate at 11 a.m. But I was like, yeah, I think I can pull it off. So I met Quinn in the parking lot there at like, it was like 2 a.m. He had gotten back from shooting some Milky Way in Du Bois, Idaho. And I just kind of, I think, slept in the parking lot there. And then, yeah, I ended up waking up. And then, yeah, we hiked it to Delta Lake for sunrise, which was a pretty intense hike for a sunrise hike, and that's how we got to know. And I've gone on one or two other hikes with him since then. So that was a couple years ago. And I'll just leave it at this, just because like if anyone hasn't followed him, like he is my favorite photographer. Honestly, super humble guy. He
Mm-hmm.
really demonstrates to me that you can have a lot of social media followers. He has over 1 million, I believe, at this point. And when you meet this guy in person, you wouldn't know it. He doesn't bring it up. He's a regular person. So I'll just leave it
Yep.
at that.
Dude, that's awesome. First, I just want to make the cheesy pun that the stars aligned with that
Yeah.
there. Literally, you went out and shot some you're out there in the middle of the night hiking and under the
Right.
stars and shooting sunset or sunrise. But dude, anyways, what an awesome story. I'm glad that came up. And I don't so I didn't like actually I've okay, so I've talked to Quinn before, but I haven't like officially met him. I kind of just
Sure.
bumped shoulders with him at an event. I think it was called Outpost. It was kind of like on the SF coast a couple of
Oh,
years
cool.
back. And dude, same thing here. Like I followed him. I knew about his work and stuff, but I didn't really know what he looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like was just in line for coffee, like chatting with him. And I think he was with his girlfriend or wife or fiance or whatever, Jess. And I didn't know, like followed her too, but I didn't really know what she looked like. And so I was just like
Right.
in line for coffee, chatting, like totally normal people. And then when I came back, my buddy was like, dude, like that was sick. Like you just, got to like connect with Quinn. And I was like, who? And who? And he's like, oh, Ever Changing Horizon. And I was like, oh shit, dude. Like
Yeah.
I literally had no idea. Like he was just such a chill, like genuine person, like almost kind of quiet, a little bit reserved. Like you would never know. Like it's so sick to see people that don't like flex their followers and their, all that
Absolutely.
stuff. It's so refreshing. And dude, that's why I love this industry so much. Like most the people you meet are super genuine because like everyone comes from an adventure or like a travel or a hiking or an action sports background, and
Mm-hmm.
generally those communities are just awesome. Like the people are so genuine. So anyways, we won't go too far into that, but that's an awesome story, dude. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Um so I've been noticing you've been blowing up pretty quick here in the last sort of year since I've been following you. Do you have any like tips or yeah, just any tips for anyone that's like trying to build their Instagram following or their presence on social media or their community? Because you have super good engagement. Like you have hundreds of comments on every photo, it seems like people love just hanging out. You're always responding to their comments. Like I'll let you
Mm.
take the stage there, but I'm inspired by your account. So
Yeah, I really
tell us,
appreciate
let us know.
I really appreciate that. So there's a couple of things that I can say that have gone into like a lot of growth on social media this year. It certainly started, and a lot of this I can honestly say to people listening to this, because if they don't, think that this is true. Like it honestly can be. Some of it is just pure luck. I mean, I'm not going to say like all luck, but I happen to get some photos that I believe I certainly worked pretty hard on in the Canadian Rockies, but kind of like you said a few minutes ago, sometimes the stars just align. So I think in certain ways I'll create my own luck because I'm just so committed. But some of those photos are just lucky. And I had some photos in Canada that just got kind of shot all over the place, so to speak. And I did decide also to play around with promoting a few of those posts that were already doing so well. I had never promoted
Smart.
anything, but that combination of having photos that were already just kind of being tossed all over the internet, and I was like, whoa, I got really lucky on that one. And then I did start experimenting more with running advertisements. And then because I did that, I blew up pretty quick at that point. So it was certainly a combined effort of like the photos started to really hit the algorithm. And then I was like, all right, I think I'm going to invest a little bit in this as well. So as a combined effect, I started to grow pretty quickly.
Nice. I think this is kind of a nitty gritty strategy, but I've heard like if you have like it sounds like what you did was like spot on, but I've heard that like if you have a post that's doing well and then you promote it, even if you don't like put a ton of money behind it, it's not really the promotion itself. I've heard Instagram just like wants you to boost your posts and spend money with them. So by doing that, they like explode your reach even more. And it actually has like nothing to do with the ad itself, like how much money you're spending on the ad, but it's just the fact that you're like promoting the post. Like I've heard people putting like $5 behind a post and then it just like opens the floodgates and it just like shows it to like way more people. I haven't really like tested it and have data behind that myself, but I don't know. It sounds like that's kind of what happened there. And I've heard similar stories. So I don't know, something to consider if you're looking for like real nitty gritty micro, like Instagram growth hacks, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I definitely seen some of those effects. I know this might not go exactly along with your question, but I've been very affiliated with this up and coming application called Dayflash. And it's kind of interesting because like, yes, I have toyed around with actually going along with some of the Instagram, I guess, incentives that they're putting out there, which I think it is kind of true. If you do invest with them a little bit, they try to help you. Dayflash has committed that they will never do that. And I've actually been like heavily involved with them. So something else maybe for the viewers to consider is that I don't know how big Dayflash is going to get, but I love Dayflash so far. And I have found that I can get a lot of views. I only have like 800 followers on the application. I've been on it for less than a year. However, they don't do ads in any way. So I've actually found, I guess there's two sides to that. Like, yes, I guess if you want to grow with Instagram, I have kind of found that they have made it very difficult to grow if you don't put any money into anything. Not saying it's impossible, because I did grow, I think, somewhere between 25 to 30,000 followers before I put any dollars into anything. So I've certainly grown accounts without, or my account without putting any money into it. But then at the same time, I am very passionate about this new application that says we're going to just try not to have anyone ever have to put a dime into anything. So who knows where it's going to go.
Tell us a little bit about Dayflash app. I mean, I vaguely know what it is, but for people listening that might not have a clue what it is. And then also sort of talk about your partnership with them, your relationship.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm glad you asked because it has become a big part of what I'm trying to do. Like, again, I don't know 100% where it's going to go, so I can't guarantee, users that it's going to be like the new TikTok or anything crazy like that. However, I do see a lot of growth in it, especially recently. I've been very involved with the founder of Dayflash. Her name is Polly. She lives out in San Francisco, and it's a photo and video sharing application. So in that idea, it would be similar to Instagram, but there are key differences that I've really enjoyed. So of course I've stuck on Instagram, a lot throughout the week in my photography because I have a big, relatively big platform there. But Dayflash, again, they've committed that they will never have anyone spend any money to get their work seen, which as I've already admitted, I have done that a bit, a little bit at least on Instagram. It's also an application where you have the ability to feature a full screen image, which for me, that's my favorite part of it, just because when you're scrolling Instagram, I think I've always been a little bit bothered by it. However, and this isn't supposed to be like an Instagram bashing session or anything like that, but I think I have always been a little bit bothered that when you're scrolling Instagram, you just see so much of like the Instagram. Um, I don't know how to describe it. The Instagram app itself, as far as like all these different words with Instagram and logos and all sorts of stuff, kind of
Hmm.
all around the picture. Day Flash has virtually none of that. If you decide to feature the photo as a full screen, all it has is like a tiny little like Day Flash thing on the bottom, and it'll just say like how many people have viewed it, comments, likes, and it literally takes up like, I don't know, maybe 5% of the screen. So it's a totally different experience. And for people that are out there, I think they would really like that aspect of it, especially as a portrait or a landscape photographer that's really trying to show their clients their work and not Instagram. So that's me. I'm like, if I take a photo of a grizzly bear, I don't want only 70% of the photo to see it, because if a client really is considering to purchase my grizzly bear photo, if they see it as a full screen, I think they're at least going to be somewhat more likely to click purchase there. So
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've seen them around, but I haven't actually used the app yet. But I'm definitely going to download it and check it out right after this call because that sounds super cool. And
absolutely,
I think everyone can kind of share your frustrations there with Instagram lately.
yeah,
Pretty much everyone I've talked to, all my friends and stuff, like everyone's just a little bit fed up with Instagram. Like it's a little ridiculous that like you follow 500 people, but you're repetitively seeing the same 20 people's posts over and over again. And
right.
like, dude, like I have friends and just like, colleagues and stuff like that are just posting insane work and I'm literally not seeing it. Like I talk
Mm,
to them, I'm like, I feel like you haven't posted a while, dude. Like, have you been shooting? Like, are you all good? And they're like, oh, dude, I post like twice a day or like every day or whatever. And I'm literally
wow,
just like, I don't see their stories. I don't see their feed
right.
posts. Like I literally have to like have a list of people that I search and like go into their, profile and like look at their
Right.
latest stuff. And so we won't rant too much about it, but I definitely
Sure.
think these other platforms, TikTok especially, maybe Day Flash, but that's what it was called, right? Day Flash app.
Yeah, Dave Flash. I
Um,
do use TikTok as well,
I
and but yeah, Dave Flash is the one that I've been most involved with.
Nice.
And I guess I'll just leave it at I am pretty involved with Dave Flash, so I certainly want people to check it out. But at the same time, I would just encourage people, and this is just me trying to be as unbiased as possible, because I'm not actually getting paid anything, at least yet, by Dave Flash, but I could see it happening at some point. So I would want to give them the most unbiased perspective as possible. For me as a content creator, I would just recommend and try to influence people to use as many platforms as possible. And I kind of wish that I had done that from day one. It's great that I have a fairly large audience on Instagram, but I wish that I had started YouTube a couple years ago, because now I'm kind of just starting YouTube. TikTok is relatively new, but I didn't jump on it 2 years ago. I jumped on it like 2 months ago. And then Day Flash, I've kind of jumped on. So I would just recommend that people just try to diversify.
That's amazing advice. Yeah. And then taking that even a step further, like email marketing and taking those people from your diversified platforms, throwing them into an email list where you send out newsletters and things like that. That's something that Adventure Labs has sort of been working on ramping up lately, but it's been really fun and just a new way to like interact with your audience because it's unfiltered. I mean, not well, unfiltered is the wrong word. There's no algorithm behind it. If you send someone an email that's subscribed to your newsletter, they're going to get it. Whether they decide to click on it or not, that's on them, but they're going to get it. So email is super cool too. Um, Kind of a follow-up question while we're on the topic of brands and collaborations. Do you monetize your photography or your Instagram account now? I heard you mention prints a couple times. That's always an amazing way to monetize your work. And it's kind of a win-win between you and the client purchasing. But I ask this to everyone, by the way. It's not just
Mhm.
pointed at you. I'm always curious to ask if people are monetizing their photography and their travels and things like that, so that if someone
Mhm.
listening can pick up some inspiration or some tips, that's what we're going for here. So talk to me a little bit about that end of things, kind of the business side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say I've started to monetize my Instagram quite a bit more, anywhere from like the tail end of 2019, probably starting this past fall to right now. And I can be honest in saying that I'm definitely at the level of followers, almost 60,000, where it is certainly very realistic for me to try to get some type of a regular income off of things like sponsored posts and endorsements. But I also would want anyone listening to know that it's still can be difficult to find those deals. So I'll give the viewers or listeners an example. So I made a pretty decent amount of money, at least for me. It's not a ton of money, but a fairly decent amount of income in March and April off of sponsored posts and endorsements. And I would just say that I had put quite a bit of effort during that 2 month period to reaching out to a lot of companies. So, for example, I had built myself a media kit probably like last year, but I really revised it back in March and tried to put all my top quality work into my media kit and started reaching out to a bunch of companies. And it's kind of a numbers game, but I was able to find quite a few companies that were interested in working with me. I selected a few that I was most wanted to work with, and I made fairly decent money off of it, at least for me. The last few months, I have gotten offers, and I actually have. I've probably got half a dozen offers for like different endorsements in my direct message and Instagram that I haven't even responded to, and it just hasn't been as much of a focus. So I think had I focused on it more in May and June now, I could probably have a few more deals, but I've been very much focused on trying to build YouTube. And then also, I've been pretty involved with trying to build Dave Flash and bring people on there. So it's certainly possible. And some months are just better than others. I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, yeah, some people think it's, when you grow your following and your influence on social media, brands just approach you and throw money at you. And usually, especially in 2020's climate where things are getting a little competitive, that's usually not the case. Like, same thing with my
Right.
personal brand and Adventure Labs. Like, we're constantly seeking clients. Like, you got to go get it. Like, people will work with you. You will make money doing it. You will do brand deals. And, it's the best thing in the world when it happens because you're getting paid to do something you love. But at the same time, you have to put in that work to make that happen. You have to,
Right.
like you said, you put together a media kit. So you got to learn how to make a media kit. You have
Yes.
to learn how to formally email back and forth with clients. You have to figure out how to strategically position, your pitch and yourself in a DM if you're DMing companies. Like, there's a lot that goes into that. So I applaud you
Absolutely.
for being at that level and getting some work. That's awesome, man. And it's cool to hear that, like, you're self-aware enough to know where your priorities are. Like, some people start making some money and that's like they kind of throw everything else away and they just do a bunch of random brand deals. But it
Right.
sounds like you're pretty selective and protective of your time and things like that. So
Thank you.
um, applaud you for that, for sure. But we're starting to run out of time here pretty soon, so I kind of want to start wrapping things up. But before we do, just a couple more questions. So I'm kind of curious to hear I ask this question to everyone as well, but what's kind of the craziest, coolest, like most fun adventure story you have? Like, travel, adventure, just like something cool, like that really,
Mhm.
you remembered for a long time. That might have been a product of photography, it might not have been, but I'm just always really curious to hear these kind of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's coincidental. I mean, I try to tell this story from time to time so that new followers can hear it. And I would say that I've tried to tell it sometimes more detailed than others on my social media. But recently, like I think it was yesterday, I put out a post about being surrounded by a wolf pack in Yellowstone. And I'm currently creating a YouTube video as well. So if listeners are listening, I do have a link in my bio where they can go and subscribe. It should be should be posted in a few days. However, to get to the story, so this was in the winter of 2018, and I actually I saw a fox cross the road. I was driving in northern Yellowstone. There's some roads that are open up there, believe it or not, in the wintertime. So I was driving in northern Yellowstone, just looking for animals. I think it was like mid-morning. I don't even know if it was early morning. And this fox crossed the road. So I find a way to park my car. I kind of got lucky again. Sometimes you get lucky as a photographer. There happened to be like a pullout, sort of a sketchy pullout, because the roads were all icy and snowy. So I managed to pull over my Toyota RAV4 and kind of sort of in a sketchy way, just kind of leave my car there. And I go off into the snow trying to see if I can get a picture of this fox that was kind of like dancing around in the snow. And long story short, I guess I kind of ended up wandering off quite a bit because the fox had made it like up and over this hillside. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if I position myself on the other side of this hill, maybe the fox will come back. It did end up coming back because a lot of times foxes are just very curious creatures. So I'm literally sitting there taking pictures of this like beautiful fox with this huge bushy tail, and eventually it runs off and it's kind of not there anymore. I start walking back towards my car, and literally a wolf runs past me in the snow. And at this point, like, I was just so, I don't know, like shocked is probably the best way to describe it. Like I knew it was a wolf. Like, there's no question about it. I had seen wolves before, but it was always through like either a really long scope and you can just barely make out the details or whatever. This is literally like a wolf just directly ran past me in the snow, and it just goes down the hill. Didn't really seem very interested in me. And I think I got a few pictures, but they weren't really that great. It was just like, oh my God, like, what the hell? Like, a wolf just ran past me in the snow. And like, I wasn't really that far from my car necessarily, probably a few hundred yards. But sometimes, like, when you're hiking in Yellowstone, whether it's the summer or the winter, and you decide to maybe go off into the valley a little bit, because there's some spaces where you can kind of walk as long as you're not like destroying plants or whatever. So if you're out there a little bit, it can seem like you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. So my car is probably a quarter mile away. Well, at that point, I'm wondering, like, I literally start walking back to my car. I didn't really get great footage of this wolf, but I had this like out of body experience that like a wolf just ran past me. I was like, holy smoke. So I start walking back to my car, and I was actually pretty scared, like visibly scared. My arms were like shaking, and it was mainly because even though this wolf didn't do anything to really try to scare me at all, I was assuming that there was more wolves, and I'm like in the snow by myself. So as I'm walking back to my car, all of a sudden I start hearing howling. So for the listeners that are listening, basically, if they can imagine, I'm walking up this hill now. Obviously, I know that there's a wolf behind me. It seemed very focused on something. Later on, I found out there was a carcass at the bottom of the hill or whatever from talking to a wolf researcher and stuff like that. But it definitely like ran down there, and it seemed pretty intent on getting to the bottom of the hill. And I'm going up this hill, and if you can imagine, I'm going up this hill, and I start to be able to see now another hill, which I knew was there, but like on the other side of the road, there's another pretty large hill, and you can kind of see like patchy trees and snow up there. At this point, I couldn't really see the road, but I knew that the road was still like a few hundred yards away. So at this point now, what I can see is this other hill, and all of these wolves are running down this hill. So in total, and I did verify this number with a wolf researcher later, but in total, it was 19 more wolves in the Wapiti Lake wolf pack that were running down this hill, completely in my direction. So, and again, at this point, I didn't know the number, but if you can just imagine, because this is still just such a surreal experience for me to think about. I'm hearing wolves howling, and I'm quite literally seeing these wolves, and it was pretty easy to see them. Like it was a few hundred yards away, like I said, at this point, but it was still pretty easy to see them as just this large dog that are literally just running down the snow. There was a number of gray dogs, and then a couple of black ones, and then one white one that I visibly saw. Ended up finding out that the white wolf is the daughter of this, and I can't even think of the name of the wolf, but it was a famous wolf that was actually poached outside Yellowstone National Park a couple of years ago, and her daughter was white, so I saw that wolf. And then at this point, they're coming down. This happened pretty quickly. And a few of them got within about 50 meters or so of me. And then some of them weren't quite as close because they kind of just ran down the hill, and some of them were continued to be about a couple hundred meters away from me. But long story short, I mean, on left and right, I'm basically surrounded by wolves, even behind me. And that's where I got the image like that I posted. If people go to my Instagram right now, they'll see a shot that I posted yesterday where it's just, I mean, I had a long lens, a 400 millimeter lens, but the wolf did get to probably within 50 meters of me. And I happened to take a pretty lucky shot of this wolf looking right at me. And
Dude, I just pulled that shot up. That is insane. That thing is beautiful.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Wow.
So, and I really, I always think about this, and I'm always like, in certain ways, I wish like maybe I had, I don't know, like anywhere from like a 50 or I don't know if a wide angle would have really captured them well because they weren't that close, a bunch of them. But had I had a 50, maybe I would have gotten more. But I had a long lens, and that's what I got basically.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an amazing shot right there.
Thank
wow.
you.
What'd you shoot that on? What setup were you rocking?
So I was shooting with, and this is typically what I've shot with my wildlife, a Canon 80D, and I had a Canon 1 to 400 millimeter lens.
Nice. Big boy. That's the monster lens there.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, dude, that is epic. How much more epic does that get than walking through the snow in Yellowstone being surrounded by a pack of wolves? That's insane. Wow. Yeah. That's so sick. And you painted the picture beautifully. I felt like I was like reliving it in my head. That was pretty cool. But yeah, okay. So last question here. Let's wrap up because we're kind of running out of time. Sure. So very last thing, here's kind of some parting words on your end. Is there any piece of advice, if you could like tell an up and coming photographer or an aspiring creative, just one thing, could be advice, could be anything, what would that be? And I like to leave this question pretty open-ended. You can answer it however you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so.
No worries. I think I know what I'm going to say. So for the viewers listening, especially if you're like, maybe you're a creative and you want to move into the professional realm, whether it's influencer or commercial photography of some type, I think the most important thing for you to do is to try to put yourself in a position where you are able to go to spots that you are going to be inspired by. So that would be the one thing. Because if you're not inspired, then you're not really going to find the motivation might be the best word to actually do the work that's necessary to move into the professional arena. So definitely keep yourself inspired by trying to find ways to budget and plan enough travels. It might only be a few little trips throughout the year. But I think, even if you can only, like, I understand a lot of people have, full-time job, family, and maybe they're married or whatever. But I talk to so many people that, like, in my DMs on Instagram that are like spending all of this time and money and energies buying all of this equipment. And then they don't really seem to have a plan for how they're going to even travel. So even if it's just like, hey, by the end of this summer, I'm going to take some time off of work, call my boss, and go to Yellowstone for a week or whatever it is. I think that's what people need to do if they even have any ambition to be like a professional travel influencer, because you're going to have to go out and get that content. And I think a lot of people get so scared that they can't like leave their wife and their kids for 5 days, or they can't take any time off of their job or whatever. And if they aren't able to like make that sacrifice to try to like take that trip, then they're never going to be inspired enough to move into that realm. So I think that's pretty much it. And just don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Nice. Amazing advice. Boom. Drop the mic. Well, thanks so much for jumping on, Brian. I've really enjoyed hearing these stories and all your advice. It's so good. I think there's a ton of value packed into this podcast here. So I appreciate you taking the time to jump on, and it was a blast kind of catching up.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I'm going to have to check out your newsletter. I'm interested to see that now. So thank you.
For sure.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
What an epic conversation we just had with Brian. The dude's done some really cool stuff. I mean, what a story he has. Working at national parks, taking tickets, meeting ever-changing horizon that way, forging friendships and business relationships and mentorships that way. Man, that's just like living your passion right there. The stars, literally, as you heard, aligned. Some really cool stories were told in that podcast. I had a blast. If you enjoyed this, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to the audio version, hit the subscribe button as well. Wherever you're listening to, leave a review. If you are listening, if you're watching, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you thought, if you were inspired. If you have any comments, questions, leave them there as well. We also have a weekly newsletter just for outdoor and adventure creators where you are going to learn things like, and by the way, it's free, how to grow an audience, how to shoot better content, things like that. Comes at you every single week. And then also the business side of things, like how to make more money as a creator, doing the things that you're passionate about. If you haven't started making money, that's totally fine. If you never plan to, that's also totally fine. But we talk about that there because a lot of people, that's sort of their end goal. So we want to help you out with that. To join that newsletter, it's just adventurelabs.co/creator newsletter. .co, not .com, adventurelabs.co/creator newsletter. Until next time, keep creating, keep adventuring, keep pursuing the things that you are oh so passionate about. And we'll see you next week. We'll see you in the next one. Maybe it's next week, maybe it's not. We'll see. We do post every week though, so we should see you next week. All right, anyways, I'm going to stop talking. Goodbye.